Also, another just general kind of theme about the whole conference was among the teachers, we know that these things around DEI and CRT, we know there's pushback from parents. We know there's pushback from the state. We know that there's laws against these things being taught. But as teachers, how do we continue teaching these things in our class? And how do we continue to convince parents that these things are good? And if the parents don't like it, how do we write them off? How do we get rid of them as a problem so that we can continue to teach these things in our classroom?
Yeah, I would imagine that they view changes in presidential administrations as irrelevant to.
Yeah, they don't care that Trump is president. It makes no difference to anything they're doing. Frankly, they don't care that we have a Republican in every single state office across the state.
Yeah,
doesn't make any difference to them.
Welcome to a very special episode of the Family Matters podcast. I'm Derek A. Stryker, Chief Legal Counsel for the Montana Family Foundation. Really excited to have Finley Warden here with us today. Finley, you and I met during the legislative session. And at that point, I don't think a whole bunch of people knew who you were or what you were doing. But boy, you are buzzing in Montana right now. Because you did it again, and really, what brought you to light in the first place was spending your free time going to the Teachers Union Conference that's put on every year. Teachers actually get a couple days off to have the opportunity to go to this conference.
Yeah, it's under Montana law that schools close down for it. So.
Yeah. We closed down the schools. Some teachers may go hunting during this time. It kind of coincides with
the good ones go hunting.
Yeah, sure. But during this conference, you have discovered and uncovered some pretty radical agenda items and kind of a secret push by the teachers union in Montana to indoctrinate our kids. So with all of that, I mean, can you tell me, what motivates somebody to get out of bed and say, I'm going to go to this conference? You're not a teacher. You just say, I'm going to go spend my free time finding out what's being talked about at these conferences.
Yeah, well, I went through the Montana public school system for 10 years of my life. And I just remember looking back, even just in first, second, third grade, throughout my whole entire experience, leftism and leftism being pushed in the classroom was completely pervasive. I went to public school in Missoula, so some people think, oh, that's just a Missoula thing. But looking at the experience from lots of young people from across the state, even in some of our most conservative communities, this is a problem that's universal across Montana. And when you ask what motivates me, it's going through that experience and really seeing the amount of damage that this ideology has had on students, especially when I got into high school. I'd come to school every day and I'd see kids who are identifying as transgender or non-binary and going by different names and pronouns than what the parents know. They think they're sending their kids to school as their daughter, Abigail, but really she's at school going the name by, like, they pick the weirdest names, by the way. Like, there was one girl named Clown. The teachers called her Clown. There was one girl who went by It, and the teachers called her It as her pronoun. So those are just more extreme examples of how it
as
can
her
be
pronoun
outwardly,
and her name.
Of how, but those are examples of how it can be like really obviously damaging. But it goes deeper than that. It's when you go through a system where through your whole life you are being conditioned to support a certain ideology, you don't have any concept that this is something foreign or that there's really an other side in all of this. So there's no concept that there is a conservative side. They're Christianity, conservatism, they're demonized whenever they're brought up. And when there's ever political discussion in the class, it's always from the side of Democrat, ranging from Democrat to socialist to even communist. And really, if you say, oh, I'm a Democrat in a public school, that's taking like the right-wing position, because most of the kids in my experience are identifying as socialists or communists.
Wow. So I think the obvious question is, how did you escape a system that is designed to make you conform with those beliefs and that ideology? I mean, what's wrong with you? How did you even escape this?
Well, I was lucky to grow up with a conservative family, and they raised me with good values. But again, just going back to, especially when I got into high school, just seeing how damaging this ideology is to families, how it destroys and disrupts families, and really how it conditions kids, students, to constantly view themselves as victims and really base their identity around all these different victim labels that they have, and not viewing yourself as an individual, but viewing yourself as are you a Black, disabled, lesbian? Like, oh, you have 3 points right there. Yeah, so that's really how they taught kids how to build their identity based on oppression groups.
Was there any math or reading taught during school hours, or is it just identity politics?
There was, obviously, there's math class, but even just take math as example. Take the word problems that the teacher used. Oftentimes there would be social justice as a basis for the problems that we are exploring, or even in science class, a focus on climate change and other left-wing science ideologies, gender transition. It's almost like I say, I kind of joke that into high school, I actually kind of stopped going to school. I just went to leftist indoctrination every day because I feel like that's all there was. Science class was climate change school. Math was how many protesters can we, let's divide the amount of protesters by the amount of signs at the protest, like just crazy math problems.
Wow.
And English class, obviously that's like English and history is where the bulk of the indoctrination was. And that was just completely outwardly social justice, far leftism, almost no focus on teaching actual real history or even teaching how to read or write. It was all just leftism that was being pushed upon students.
So you're surrounded by semi-literate social justice warriors. Are there other Finley Wardens in your class, or are you the only one? I mean,
yeah, I mean there were other kids who were raised in conservative Christian households, but throughout my whole experience going through public school, I was the only one who ever spoke up against teachers about it. When a teacher would say something so obviously wrong or so obviously evil, I don't think they're used to kids talking back against them or speaking up, but oftentimes I'd raise my hand and say, hey, this is wrong. You are wrong. What you're teaching doesn't align with the truth. And I think that really caught lots of them off guard. And it really caused lots of my teachers, especially into high school, to hold a truly deep disdain for me. Like when I'd walked into school every day, I could tell the looks that other teachers, even ones I didn't have, gave me. There was like a push among pretty much most of the teachers in the school to kind of ostracize me and to kind of put me in my own category to make sure that I can't do anything by being the only open conservative student. And obviously that didn't work because now I'm kind of getting my payback a little bit.
Okay. So I mean, what are some examples of I guess standing up to and speaking truth in the classroom? Do you have, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it can be kind of grandiose and like I'm speaking up for the truth, but other times, like for example, like if the teacher just says something pro-Democrat, like explicitly pro-Democrat, like you should vote for Hillary Clinton. I remember my fifth grade teacher talking about that, and I speak up and say, hey, you're a teacher, maybe we should not be bringing politics in the classroom.
In fifth grade, Finley?
Yeah. And there's literally...
None of you can vote in fifth grade.
Yeah, none of us can vote in fifth grade, except for our school mock election that we held. Okay. But even like really explicit examples like that, there's just like a cognitive dissonance that happens to the teachers. Like when I speak and say, this isn't right, there's just no recognition that the classroom is a place to be non-biased. Like they've never experienced anything else. And just in general, I should say, for when I talk about teachers, and I'll give some examples later about how I saw some really amazing teachers at this teachers conference, actually. Right. but there are really good teachers out there who do keep politics out of the classroom. I would not say it's a majority. I would say 50% teachers are openly social justice warriors, leftists, and the remaining 40% are pushing those things just because it's part of their education, just because they don't know any better. And I'd say probably about 10% are intentionally leaving politics out of the classroom.
Yeah. Well, I would ask you, I mean, should we have politics out of the classroom, or should it be a system where you can have politics in the classroom, but it can't just be presented from one viewpoint?
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to say it. And what I'm saying is I'm not saying we should have no politics in the classroom. I think these discussions should happen. I think there should be an openness to talk about challenging issues, about the issues of our time. But it should not come exclusively from the angle of the far left, and should not come always through the lens of oppression and oppressors, and this lens that capitalism is bad. That's always the lens politics was viewed through in school, is how is this group oppressed? How is capitalism harming our country? That was always the view through which politics was viewed and talked about.
Right. And yet, capitalism and the form of government that we have enables this free public education system with these fantastically funded public schools.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
We can set that aside for a moment. I think for our viewers, they're getting a sense of kind of the genesis of why somebody would wake up after going to public school and decide, I want to go find out a little bit more about the Teachers Union Conference. So when was the first one you attended? Was that last year? Yeah,
I attended last year's one last October. Again, they closed down the schools 2 days every year. And this is where teachers go and they receive their required professional development training. In Montana, in order to keep your teaching license every year, you need to take a certain amount of credits in professional development to keep your licensure. So these are things that teachers are. In some cases, there are teachers who are required to go to this conference by their school districts, and they are even paid to go there by their school districts. But besides that, this is an event. This MFPE teachers event is something that teachers are heavily compelled into going to so that they can receive their required professional development.
Okay, so professional development is the conference, the overarching. I'm assuming that they're going to learn the latest and greatest teaching methods and how to present certain topics to their students. What are they really going for?
Well, there is, I believe, 300 to 400 different sessions at this conference, and teachers are free to pick whichever ones they want. They can take from a list of 400, they could to build their schedule and go to whichever one they want to. And I do think there is some discussion about what are the newest education trends, like what's going on in our schools that are just non-biased. I know there is some of that happening, but on a larger scale, on a more overarching scale, that is not what's being taught. There's a heavy focus again on social justice, on pushing leftism in the classroom. And specifically, we'll go into this, but specific far left sessions that have been taught for the last 2 years, where the whole focus of the session is on how do you indoctrinate your kids in the classroom, how do you hide it from the parents, and how do you not get caught legally? Because in the state of Montana, we have laws that push back against this stuff.
Right. In fact, that's where we met, in the halls of the Capitol, talking about the conference you attended last year. And you'll have to remind me, some of the topics were pretty outrageous, but I remember the gender unicorn, which was a whole new mythical beast for me. The genderbread man, things like this that I had never heard. Of course, it wasn't around when I went to school. So can you explain some of the things that are being taught in these more woke?
So that's a really good example. That came from a session titled, the name of the session for teachers was the LGBTQ state of the state. It was billed as, what is the overview of what it's like to be an LGBTQ student or teacher in the state of Montana? And this was from the 2024 conference, last year's conference. And I sat there and listened while this presenter, who was flown in from out of state by the National Educators Association, while he was talking about how do you how do you push pronoun usage in the classroom among students? How do you use the appropriate pronouns of students even when parents are not okay with it? How do you change students' names in the system despite it being against Montana law without parental permission? And how do you push these just extreme materials in the classroom, like the gender unicorn? And I encourage anybody to go look what the gender unicorn is. It's literally a handout that's given to preschoolers, kindergartners, first graders, where they get to choose, where do I stand on the scale of my gender, of how I feel as a person? Where do I stand on the scale of who I'm attracted to? These are preschoolers. Like, these are not questions that are appropriate, but they're also pushing the idea that gender and sexuality are somehow this scale that you can just, it's like picking out your personality. Like, I can just pick where I am on all these scales, and that's who I am as a person.
And this trend has been starting younger and younger.
Younger and younger. I'd say the first explicit examples of far left ideology was probably in the 4th and 5th grade, and just got worse and worse. Yeah. But my younger brother, he's only just 2 years younger than me. Seeing him, and I remember his like third grade teacher, so even younger for him, was pushing this kind of stuff in the classroom as well. And I think another thing we could talk about is how the schools of education in the country, every single teacher, whether you are conservative or liberal, where you stand, every single teacher needs to go through this education system. And they are pressured with this left-wing ideology. They are taught in it. They are stewards of it. So when they go to teach in the classroom, no matter what grade you teach, they don't know any better. They oftentimes, even if you are just a good, normal teacher, you don't know anything else but to push leftist ideology.
Yeah. Wow. So, okay, genderbread man, gender unicorn. What are some other, I guess, from last year's conference? And then I want to talk a little bit about this year's conference.
Yeah, from last year's conference, and this was actually a repeat this year as well. But there was a whole 2-hour workshop on microaggressions in the classroom. So
what is a microaggression?
Well, it's in the name. It's an aggression that is micro, and but they don't treat it like it's micro. It's obviously to them this huge offense against a person. So if for example, like one of the examples they did is a boss telling a female teacher to dress nice for an event in the school that's coming up. That's a microaggression against the woman, because it's pushing some sort of expectation upon her. But it was a full 2-hour session going into all the different examples of how you can do a microaggression against people based on their gender, people based off their race, against their sexuality. And the funny thing is, the presenter, he really emphasized the micro and how these micro offenses can truly be to them like the most offensive thing that you can possibly say to them.
Well, and it's bizarre too, because it conflates, I guess, aggression, which I would say you generally think of it in terms of violence, particularly physical violence, with just speech, breaking down that barrier between, speech becomes violence, so then violence becomes speech. Yeah. And I think we've seen that play out in the country over the past few years. That's bizarre to me, that you could say, there's a certain dress requirement for an event, and that becomes
a microaggression.
A microaggression. Wow. So let's set the table here a little bit, Finley, because at the legislature you brought this to light in several hearings, that this is the sort of pervasive agenda-driven content that is pushed during this conference. Obviously, it's funded by taxpayer dollars, which are then funneled to the union, and the union then invests in bringing someone in from out of state to lecture our teachers about the genderbread man and the gender unicorn. So this is all brought to light. First of all, let me ask you this: Did you go in disguise?
The first year I did, I was nervous that some of my teachers from my time in public school would recognize me, so I just did a spray dye on my hair, and I wore fake glasses. I dyed my hair brown, and because I was nervous about it, I didn't end up being caught in any way whatsoever. And this just a week ago when I went, I knew that based off the things I said in the legislature, they know who I am now. So I signed up for the event under my real name, just going as myself. And I was walking into the building fully convinced that I'm going to get 3 steps in there and they're going to have a security guard come up to me and say, hey, you are not allowed to come into this event. But no, I walked up to the registration table. They handed me my badge and I went to sit down through all the sessions.
Wow.
And I can talk about this later too, but I talked to Amanda Curtis, the head of the union. She was aware that I was coming. She let me know that that when she saw my registration, she said she was unsure of what to do with it. And my kind of thought is I'm exposing all these far left things from their conference that are kind of opening up these teachers who are giving these presentations to a lot of criticism. They know these far left things are happening. They know I'm going to expose them, and they knew I was coming, and they're opening these teachers to this risk with the full knowledge that I would be sitting there and recording these things. So it's almost like I don't know that they don't care about looking out for their teachers. Like if I was them, I would try to be hiding what I was doing because I'd recognize that this is illegal and this is bad and it's going to be exposed. So I don't even know what their thought process was with that.
So you had exposed them previously, and I think I would certainly expect that the content would be toned down this year. That's not what you found.
That's what you would think. Yeah, based off my reporting from last year, I mean, I was literally standing right in front of the union representative when I got up on that lectern in front of the legislature. You were there,
yes.
And I said, "This is the LGBTQ state of the state. This is an example of far left and illegal things being taught by MFPE, being pushed in our classroom." You'd think that they would tone it down, and you'd think that they would say, "Hey, maybe we shouldn't teach this stuff anymore because of the backlash we received," and they did not. In this last year, there's continued examples of explicit far left ideologies being taught. But also another just general kind of theme about the whole conference was among the teachers, we know that these things around DEI and CRT, we know there's pushback from parents. We know there's pushback from the state. We know that there's laws against these things being taught. But as teachers, how do we continue teaching these things in our class? And how do we continue to convince parents that these things are good? And if the parents don't like it, how do we write them off? How do we get rid of them as a problem so that we can continue to teach these things in our classroom?
Yeah, I would imagine that they view changes in presidential administrations as irrelevant to.
Yeah, they don't care that Trump is president. It makes no difference to anything they're doing. Frankly, they don't care that we have a Republican in every single state office across the state.
Yeah,
doesn't make any difference to them.
No, the agenda will remain.
Yes.
And it's more important that we continue with this agenda and teach. I might use air quotes there, but teach children these concepts from an earlier and earlier age. What are some of the highlights from this last conference? And you know, by the way, we've heard some of the recordings that you've published. I know there's probably more to come.
There are, yeah.
But this is shocking stuff. What can you give us a taste of what you saw, what you heard?
Yeah, so the one that is kind of going most viral right now on the internet that's getting lots of major attention is there is a session for librarians across the state on law and advocacy in the library. So basically the theme of it was
law and advocacy.
Law and advocacy.
It's not really a place to advocate.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be quiet.
Yeah.
You know, you get shushed in a library. You're not advocating for anything. You're reading books.
Yeah, so it was teaching teachers how do we continue to be advocates for pushing these books that are being banned in the classroom? How do we keep them in our library? How do we push back against what they call book bans in the classroom when we know that these books being banned are just books that contain sexual content that's inappropriate for kids? And this was a middle school teacher giving this presentation in the state of Montana. And she called this her own personal censorship success story. There was a book in the library that the other librarian at the school recognized, hey, this is a graphic novel. It's called Heartstopper. It's a Heartstopper series of books. This contains graphic sexual content. It contains talk about LGBTQ topics and transgender, non-binary topics among minors. She said, I'm going to remove this from the library because this is inappropriate. And the other librarian, the librarian who was giving this presentation, she found out about it. And she was pissed off. She was pissed off that the other librarian didn't tell her about it. She was pissed off that she didn't go through the administration. So she gave the story about how it was a 2 year long process to get these books back into her library, back on the shelves, so that kids that in the middle school can continue to read them.
I'll tell you my what I consider to be my victory story. About 4 years ago, I had a book in my library that my colleague removed without telling me. I did not find out about it until after it was already gone. And this was a situation where this librarian struggled to maintain objectivity. So just this year, I was able to order that book. It is on its way.
So we're talking about 11, 12, 13-year-olds.
Yes.
And when you say graphic novel, we're not talking about a comic book.
That is what I meant. It is a graphic
but
novel.
An incredibly
it's a graphic novel series that has graphic material in it.
Wow.
Yes.
I mean, what's the point? What's the point of what did the teacher give you, or the librarian give you any clue as to why it's important to have this content available to 11-year-olds?
I think that they view book bans as an attack on their profession as librarians. They view it as an attack on their profession as educators for students. They take it personally. And even if there is somewhere in their mind, and there is, I walked up to the librarian afterwards and she literally admitted to me, she's like, yeah, the 5th book in this series, this is like, it has some like kind of racy stuff in it. She said that to me. So even she recognizes on some level that this stuff is inappropriate. But they see these so-called threats happening, and I think they get so defensive around it. They just feel that they need to have all these books in their library, because why shouldn't they be available to students? There are books being banned. They are comparing these book bans to what Hitler did. They are comparing it to some of the worst censorship that's happening in history. And they view themselves as the social justice stewards on the forefront, fighting against these so-called bans. They've built that narrative. That's a narrative they built up in their heads.
Well, and I frankly refuse to accept it as a quote unquote ban, because it's not a ban. I mean, because of capitalism, by the way, we have a free market where if you as a parent or even as a child want to go out and purchase said book or said content, you're free to do so. The difference here is that we have libraries that are providing this content to children, and so it's not a ban; it's a limitation based on
you can't
age
have every book
appropriateness.
you can't have every book in the school library, but they're making a special focus that they have these far left radical sexual books in their library.
And there's no other pornographic. I mean, they don't have Hustlers and Playboy magazines in the library as well. I'm assuming.
No, they don't. I haven't seen examples of that.
And no one's calling for
but in a way,
book ban.
In a way, it's more insidious, because these are books that are branded towards kids.
Right.
They are branded as being safe towards kids. The librarians are pushing their kids to especially read these books. So no, there's not a Playboy magazine in the library, but in a way, it's kind of worse than that, because these are books that are being branded towards children.
That's a really good point. So what are some of the other, I mean, we've talked about these agenda-driven advocate librarians, which is a whole new category of librarian. What are some of the other conference topics that I mean, this is 2 days of just
2 full days.
Session after session of amazing content.
Yeah. So there's one session it was billed as being for art teachers in the state, but any teacher could go to it. And it was by a DEI art council that exists in the state, and their whole goal is to continue to push DEI in art classrooms specifically, but also just across all classrooms, despite the bans that we have out in the state. And I'm not using the term DEI. That's their words. They called it DEI. And it was an hour-long discussion. We were all sitting in a circle in an art classroom at the University of Montana. And these teachers were going through all their different ways that they are continuing to push DEI in the classroom, despite the bans. A few examples are, hey, we're not allowed to have these big, huge pride flags. One teacher even said, my pride flag is bigger than my American flag. She bragged about it. We're not allowed to do that anymore. We're not allowed to push these things explicitly. But how can I still be open towards my students having a non-binary identity? How can I let them know that they're so-called safe in my classroom? How can I hide far left symbols secretly around my classroom so that students who are far left can also identify that? So that was the theme of that, is that despite these bans, how can we continue to advocate for these things in the classroom, not under the guise of necessarily DEI. In some case, yes, they use DEI specifically for the name of the session, but they are also talking about how can we change the names of these things so we're not receiving so much pushback from parents.
And that's the point of that session. It's not to, how do we teach kids to paint or to sculpt? It's how do we hide our true agenda in the art classroom?
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, are those the only two? They can't be the only two. I mean, you have...
No. Another one was, it was a panel discussion from two history teachers in the state, and they were talking, the whole hour-long thing was, they called it addressing the problems in the modern history classroom. And the whole panel discussion was just, it's very similar to the other one. How can we continue to push these things in the classroom despite the pushback we were seeing from parents? And they specifically did what they called a role play, where the one teacher was pretending to be the parent, the other teacher was pretending to be the teacher. And the parent goes to the teacher and says, I don't like that you're teaching DEI and CRT in the classroom. And they were acting out what to do if that happens to you as a teacher. And how they acted it out was, if a parent comes to you complaining about these things, be defensive. Point out any flaw in the argument of the parents that you can possibly find. Say that, I'm not actually teaching DEI and CRT. Like, the teacher specifically gave the example to say, I actually don't even know, I know DEI stands for diversity, equity, inclusion, but what does that even mean? I know CRT stands for critical race theory, but I don't even really understand what that means. Like, they're teaching teachers to play dumb when they're confronted with these things. And when you look at the parents in the state who are going to the teachers and confronting their students' teachers about this, you don't expect parents to be educated on every single aspect of far left ideology. So DEI and CRT are the things that parents know. They're the things that have been in the media. And so when you go to the teacher and say, hey, I know you're teaching this. I've seen my kids' material that they're bringing home. And the teacher goes, well, I don't even know what CRT is. I've never heard of DEI. That's how teachers are taught to push back against parents, to completely dismiss parents.
So this is the training
Yes.
that they received as part of their continuing education as teachers, is to be dishonest with parents.
Yes.
And to role play and train for parents who are questioning the types of agenda-driven topics that are being pushed in the classroom that are being purposefully hidden from parents. Wow. That's just incredible. It's incredible that you've uncovered this. I think there's many folks out here who believe this has been going on, but you have the receipts.
Yeah, well, not only do I have the receipts, but this is something that parents have been, they see it continually getting worse every year. I've seen it through my whole life going through the public school system. Parents are sick and tired of being lied to and gaslit that this is not happening in the classrooms, because it is. We can see it with our own eyes. We can see that when our kids come home from school, they are bringing home this far left material with them. Parents are sick of being gaslit. They elected these Republicans in Helena and to Washington to fight back against it. And as conservatives, as Christians, we need to finally stand up and say, enough of this. We need to fight back. We need to fight back using the law. We need to fight back. Parents need to stand up and push against these things in their communities. Because I think it's important for people to understand this is an organized effort that's basically been going on for the history of our own country. You can trace this back to almost about 100 years ago with some of the first far left teachers organizing in universities. And slowly it's been trickling down over the past decades from the university level all the way down to pre-K. And this is a multi-decade, multi-generational effort from the far left. And it's going to take equal action from the right to fight back against it.
Yeah. Well, and it seems to me that just fundamentally, the purpose of the public education system by and large is to indoctrinate, as you said earlier.
Yeah.
And
I don't think it has to be that way.
no, it shouldn't.
No.
I don't think that's the purpose, the true purpose of education. Finley, thank you so much for what you're doing. My last question for you would be this. What type of backlash are you getting? Because we talked a little bit about violence is speech and speech is violence now in today's modern age. I mean, are you being threatened? Are you worried about that?
I am getting some backlash just from the union, for example. Yesterday morning, I was on Aaron Flint's show talking to his audience about what I uncovered. And the teachers union, in the middle of us being on air, and I'm on their email list, the MFP email list, so I can see this, they sent out an email to all of their members saying to call into the show to tell the truth of what actually happened at the educators conference. And I mean, I'm telling the truth. I have the recordings. I mean, you can't argue against that.
The very same union that had trained their members to be dishonest.
Yeah. So I'm seeing pushback from them, obviously. But I'll give another example. But I'm just seeing parents standing up across the state, recognizing that, hey, we have these recordings now. We can use this as direct evidence against these schools, against these administrations.
Yes.
Parents can now show this to their schools and say, we know that you're doing this. And this was actually the last session I attended at the MFP conference. It was called, it was basically their legislative session update. It was about 60, 75 teachers sitting in the room. Amanda Curtis and their other chief lobbyists were speaking. And Amanda Curtis went, okay, everybody, I'm going to play you a video from the legislature. And on the big screen, on the big speaker in front of everybody, they played a video of you, me, and Max Nelson from the Freedom Foundation, all testifying while I was sitting there in the room. And Amanda Curtis points to me in front of this room of teachers and points me out. So I was getting all these looks from teachers, and it was really amazing. These two teachers sitting next to me, they spoke up and they went, well, is this true? In this video, Finley said there's this LGBTQ training happening at your conference. And the teacher raised her hand and says, well, Amanda, did that actually happen? And they had to admit, well, yeah, it did. And they said, well, Finley was lying about it. It didn't happen in the way he was saying it did. And I was like, well, no, I have the actual full recording of it. I can back up every single thing I'm saying with audio evidence. So I think that just kind of shows that there are parents pushing back against this. There are good teachers pushing back against this who just want to teach good education to their students. Yeah. So I think there is lots of hope.
Well, of course there's hope. Well, Finley, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. On behalf of the Montana Family Foundation, thank you so much for listening and watching. If you like this kind of content, be sure to subscribe, hit the like button and the little bell so you never miss another episode. Thank you so much, and God bless.